Hey, Kevin McCarthy here. I'm the author of this book. Can you see that? Realizing Jesus, K.C. McCarthy. That's me. And you can call me Kevin. There's just too many Kevin McCarthys out there. So my pen name is K.C. McCarthy. And first, I'd like to thank everybody that have been making so many wonderful, supportive comments about the book. And it's really such a encouragement that it seems so many people have been positively affected by the book. And when you're in the process of writing a book, you have no idea if anybody else is even going to read this. You just plow ahead anyway. So just thank you so much for those of you that have purchased the book and have read it and have given so many wonderful comments about the book. And I'm so grateful that it's had a positive effect. I get a lot of comments and requests. Why don't you do an audio book? And I got plans to do that. But also a lot of people have been asking me if I could just give a synopsis of the book or an overview of the book and some of the what are the certain motives and purposes of the book. And so I'd like to just take a couple of minutes to maybe touch upon the first three chapters, because in a sense the first three chapters are like an introduction to the entire book. The first chapter, and actually the introduction chapter is very important to read, so don't skip over that. But the first chapter is entitled The Two Houses. And the two houses are referring to the house of Joseph, of course, Joseph and Mary. And the second house is the house of Zechariah and Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the cousin of Mary. Zechariah was one of the chief priests of the, I think it was 26 various divisions of the faith. And Zechariah was a very significant chief priest and resided very close, only about 3 or 4, well, in the suburbs, so to speak, of Jerusalem. So the story of the first chapter talks about basically the preparation. God sends Gabriel to Zechariah to inform him that his wife is going to give birth. She's very elderly, and he's very surprised by that. And that their son is going to be a very significant prophet for the Messiah. That he's, in fact, the Elijah who is to come. And of course, the traditional belief of the time was that before the Messiah would come, Elijah the prophet would come. So Gabriel tells Zechariah, your son, who of course is John the Baptist, is going to be that great prophet who is to make a people prepared for the Lord. So all this preparation in the house of Zechariah is documented in this first chapter. Also, for example, Elizabeth, when she meets Mary, sees Mary, Mary comes to visit them to help, under the impression that she comes to help Elizabeth with her pregnancy. She sees her cousin and she exalts, hallelujah, the basis of the traditional Hail Mary prayers. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. These are the words of Elizabeth when she sees Mary and recognizes that Mary is going to give birth to the expected Messiah and King of Israel, the one they've all been waiting for. So the first chapter basically documents all of these amazing preparations. Gabriel was working overtime. And the point being that clearly God is seeking to bind these two families together, and that they're going to have a very, very important mission throughout the course of Jesus' mission. So we establish that, or I should say, the Bible establishes that. Then the next chapter is titled The First Christmas. And you'll find that the first Christmas, this chapter, is in stark contrast to the traditions of Christmas, the hark the herald angels sing, the little Lord Jesus asleep in the hay. The nativity scenes, the hopeful spirit of Christmas. But actually, let me just read the how the first Christmas actually ends quite differently. The first Christmas comes to an end with the sounds of screaming fathers and mothers as their precious sons were snatched from their loving arms and hacked to death in front of them. Israel's new king, being Jesus, was fleeing to the south with Joseph and Mary to Egypt, fleeing to the south and in exile. For Jesus, Israel had become an angry and treacherous land. That was the first Christmas. And of course, that's telling the story of how when Herod was brought up to speed by the Magi, that a new king had been born, and he was not happy about it. And so when the Magi didn't return to let him know where this new king was dwelling, he flew in a rage and sent his soldiers to there where Jesus was, to Bethlehem, and ordered that every male child under the age of 2 should be killed. What a terrible tragedy. That's how the first Christmas ended. Then we go to the third chapter, which is entitled Jesus the Child. Jesus the Child. And of course, this is the story of it's only about 10 verses in the Bible that talk about Jesus at the age of 12. And as a matter of fact, it's the only rendering of any story about Jesus from birth to the age of 30. And it is this story, which is very well known. Joseph and Mary and Jesus were in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, and the festivities had ended, and they were returning back to Nazareth. And they traveled for a day, assuming that Jesus was with maybe friends or other family members. And then they realized, after about a day, that no, he wasn't with them. And so they realized that he was back in Jerusalem. He never came with any of the family. So they headed back to Jerusalem, and they started to look for him. And they looked for 3 days. They looked everywhere except to the one place that Jesus had been the entire time. And where was that? That was the temple. When they finally found him, he said, "How is it that you could not understand that I would be at my Father's house? How could you not know that this is where I would be?" And it's really a stunning indictment, in a sense, of Joseph and Mary, because, again, the first 2 chapters we're seeing clearly that Joseph knows what Jesus' mission is supposed to be. Mary certainly knows what Jesus' mission is supposed to be. Zechariah knows what Jesus' mission is supposed to be. Elizabeth knows. How is it, come to think of it, how is it that given all of these parameters, that the birth of Jesus took place in a stable? Do you know how far away Zechariah and Elizabeth lived from Bethlehem? 5 miles. Now think how far the Magi came. When they just saw a star in the sky, think how far they came to attend and to celebrate the birth of a new king, and they weren't even Jewish. Yet Zechariah and Elizabeth, couldn't provide a proper and sanitary and secure place for the Son of God to be born when they fully knew? Gabriel explained. Zechariah fully knew that the son of Mary was going to be the long-awaited king, and that his son was to make a people prepared. Yet why were Joseph and Mary so abandoned, giving birth to Jesus in a stable amongst the stench and unsanitary conditions? I'm sorry. It's indicative that something isn't going right. Something has gone awry. And so, in reality, Jesus should have been raised in the temple, just like Samuel, the prophet, was raised by Eli in the tabernacle. And just as, according to the Gospel, the birth of Mary, which is a non-canonical work, suggested that Mary herself was raised in the temple at Jerusalem. So that's where Jesus was, because he could sense, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be amongst these teachers of the law, these very august scholars, to really learn the history and the teaching of Israel. That's really where I should be, not as a carpenter's apprentice in Nazareth. So when Mary and Joseph find Jesus, they're amazed. Well, this was the last place they looked, and Jesus scolded them for that. Hey, you're supposed to know what my real destiny is, and this is where I'm supposed to be. The temple is something like what Harvard used to be. Harvard was a seminary. It started out as a seminary. As a matter of fact, all the great universities in the United States started out mostly as seminaries. And that's where Jesus wanted to be. He didn't see a future in being a carpenter. But it says that Mary and Joseph were confused and they pondered these things in their heart. But ultimately, it's back to Nazareth and back to the life of just sweeping up the shop, putting away the wood and materials, and learning the trade. And that's a disappointment. It's also an indication that something has gone awry in the vision of many significant people. Joseph, Mary, Zechariah and Elizabeth. Already there is a breach, there's a disturbance in the force. And it's why Jesus said, wait, I got to get that verse. Hold it. Let me read that. Let me read that exactly. Yeah. It's in Mark 6, 6, verse 2 and 3. Jesus began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, "From whence hath this man these things? And what wisdom is this which is given unto him, that even such mighty works are wrought by his hands?" In other words, he's in his own hometown, and the hometown people are going, wait a minute. How did he get such knowledge? We know who he is. And they go on to say, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph, and of Judah and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they were offended at him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor. Feel the angst in his heart. He says, a prophet is not without honor, but a prophet is not without honor, but the exception in his own country and among his own kin and even in his own house. we move on from there. But we move on with a sense that the necessary support that God had prepared and intended for Jesus was struggling and was falling away and wasn't really stepping up to the plate. So this is really the introduction to the book. And the rest of the book really explains then the whole story of what Jesus had to contend with and what ultimately he was seeking to accomplish. I hope this helps, and we'll go through the entire book. We'll do a whole series of this. And we're working on our audio book, so look for that. But I do hope you pick up a copy of this and read it. And I'd really love to get your comments and your inspirations. Thank you for watching. I hope this was meaningful for you. You have a good day.